A massive bureaucratic upheaval is underway in Bihar. The Election Commissioner of India has launched a special intensive revision of the voter list in the state, one of India's poorest, most migratory and politically pivotal. It's the first such exercise in over 2 decades. Most critically, it requires thousands of people in the state to furnish new documentation, which is not your average Aadhaar, Manrega or ration cards, to stay on the rolls. The time to implement this mega overhaul? 30 days. Naturally, critics have called it rushed, exclusionary, and even an unconstitutional move that will lead to the disenfranchisement of thousands. The Election Commission has said it's a necessary cleanup before the upcoming elections. But why was this exercise necessary? What will be the impact? Is this NRC 2.0? And could this become a template for a national roll revision? Listen on as we break it down with some experts. It's Thursday, the 10th of July. I'm Anirban Chowdhury. This is the Morning Brief. First, I spoke to my colleague, ET's senior editor and one of its finest trackers of the government, Anubhuti Vishnoi. I started by asking her, what is a special intensive revision?
So basically, it involves very intensive house-to-house verification, which means the booth-level officer will go to each house and verify whether this person lives here or not. Is this, elector who's there on the electoral roll? Is he a genuine voter? Things like that. That is an intensive revision. See, I'll just go back to what is an electoral roll revision in the first place. It's done every year. You just check the people who are there on the electoral roll. That is a list of people eligible to vote. That is the electoral roll of any constituency. Now, usually what we do is a summary revision, which the EC does every year. There is no house-to-house verification involved in that. They'll invite claims and objections, of course, that, if you have an objection to somebody being there who is not a resident of this area, etc., all that is done in a summary revision.
Understood. And Anubhuti, what would be the trigger for the Bihar SIR?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, that summary revisions are normally done. Special summary revisions are also done ahead of Lok Sabha elections or ahead of any election, which is done in case of Bihar. So, at this time, usually one would expect that the commission would do a general special summary revision ahead of the assembly election. That is normal practice. Now, to announce an intensive revision has taken a lot of people by surprise. And usually an intensive revision involved a de novo exercise. Like, you from scratch, you built up an electoral roll all over again. That's not the case with Bihar. In Bihar, they're using the 2003 electoral roll as a base. See, the basic distinction that the EC has made is those whose name was there in the 2003 electoral roll. They don't need to give any other proof except an extract of the 2003 electoral roll where they were mentioned. That qualifies as proof for them. Okay? But those who were not there in the 2003 electoral roll, that is where a lot of documentation is required. So for such people, in case you're born between 1987 and 2004, then you will give your date of birth and the date of birth proof for one of your parents. But if you're born after 2004, not only will you give date of birth proof for yourself, but for both your parents. Now, this is where it has got into a huge debate on, people not able to find those kind of documentation proofs, because EC has listed about 11 documents of proof, which range from birth certificates, of course, and your passport and your educational, your board certificate or matriculation certificate, to your caste certificate. So those are the documents which are acceptable under this SIR. So that's why the Bihar SIR is very different from the practice done earlier. Usually earlier there was house-to-house verification, but not this kind of intense document verification.
And what about the fact that documents like Aadhaar, Manrega have been, and even the ration card have been excluded from that list of documentation, which has led to criticism that it would lead to disenfranchisement of a section
Right, absolutely. So this is being hotly debated. I'll add one more point to how this intensive revision is different. That is that Election Commission has waded into the area of citizenship in this particular intensive revision. So what happens is Aadhaar cannot be accepted because Aadhaar is not considered a proof of citizenship. That is the reason Aadhaar has not been listed as a document. Ration card, because they have been digitized in most states and not in every state, etc. So it has become a fuzzy territory. Same case with Manrega. Now, the EC in its wisdom has not added these, though it has said that the list of documents it has put out is indicative and it is not exhaustive. It's unclear, but Aadhaar is clearly not there. So yes, this is a pain point because most people have these more readily available, especially Aadhaar is more easily available with everybody. Aadhaar, PAN, driving license, none of those documents are there. But as I mentioned, because the EC has now got into a citizenship issue, these are not considered proof of citizenship.
Anubhuti, is this CAA 2.0 or NRC 2.0?
So that is the political contention. That is this a backdoor entry for the NRC, or are we doing a citizenship registry through this? Now, EC has usually not got into this domain. EC is well within its power to conduct an intensive revision anywhere. Now, getting into the domain of citizenship, and as you said, which has opened it to this whole argument around NRC and CAA, as you mentioned, that is debatable because there are several court judgments on this matter which drew up very strong guidelines for the commission, where it was mentioned that the onus and the burden of proof cannot be on the citizenry. So in between 1992 and 1994, there were a clutch of petitions because EC had issued certain orders. They empowered the district collectors to determine if any person was a foreigner or not through police verification. And there was another order which came from the EC which allowed the ERO, the Electoral Registration Officer, to identify and declare names of foreign nationals and delete their names from the electoral roll. So the Supreme Court quashed both the EC directions and said that the EC guidelines had put onus of proof of citizenship with the person involved, disregarding that several people had voted in earlier elections. So how are you suddenly disenfranchising them? And also said that even if you find somebody with suspected citizenship, you have to, before even issuing the notice, you have to examine the whole gamut of documentation he may have and give due value to the fact that he was on other electoral rolls. Before that, a full inquiry was to be conducted. It said it has to be it's nearly a quasi-judicial proceeding. So more than reasonable opportunity must be given to a citizen before you say he cannot be on the electoral roll, because only citizens can be on the electoral roll. In fact, after these judgments, EC stayed off the question of citizenship over the years. While it conducted many revisions, it has been very careful, cautious on this citizenship issue. In Assam, you had the D list, the doubtful list issue always, when they said, that you could go verify a citizen, which is a huge political flashpoint. So there also the Supreme Court reminded the Commission that the idea was not to cause injustice to genuine citizens, but to prevent foreigners from being included in the voters list. Now, till today, you have the voters from that exercise of 1999 who could not become part of the electoral roll. And because you are under a doubtful category, neither can you contest elections nor can you vote. So it's a very tricky territory, I'd say a very slippery slope. And the reason for doing so in Bihar, thereby, it has generated such a lot of political heat and debate because one cannot find a good enough reason for doing so. The Commission, of course, in its directions has said rapid urbanization, mass migration, issues of, lots of deletion and changes in names, etc., has warranted this. But this citizenship question and aligning this revision with the Citizenship Act of 2003. If you read the enumeration form, it's almost like a copy and paste from the Citizenship Act, where the categorization of citizens from 1987 to 2003 is done. With all that, the EC has consciously waded into the contentious issue of citizenship, which is at the core of this debate as well.
Got it. Is the 30-day window slightly impractical, as the opposition is saying?
It is certainly tight, and we've reported it in ET on condition of anonymity, that while EC is well within its remit to conduct an intensive revision, but this is just too tight. When you have elections, you have to have a new assembly in place in Bihar by 22nd November. So this leaves a very short window. Also, please remember in the past, whenever the EC has conducted an intensive revision, there was enough gap between the election and the revision. So, that allowed a lot of the voters time in case you were not able to produce your document or, so the pressures were not so high on anybody from the election machinery to the citizen did not feel so pressured. In this case, because the timeline is so short, you have to fill and submit your enumeration form between 25th June to 25th July. Your final electoral roll is on 1st of September. So that has certainly compressed time considerably. That is part of the plea also made by opposition leaders and others in the Supreme Court, where the case is coming up for hearing on Thursday.
So, at the heart of this debate is the change in process. Next, Anubhuti spoke to former Chief Election Commissioner Ashok Lavasa and asked him how he sees this change.
You see, the enrollment of electors has always followed a certain process. Now, whether it is an ongoing enrollment, which keeps happening continuously throughout the year, or it's a summary revision or an intensive revision or an annual revision or a special intensive revision. So these are the different formats of revision which Election Commission is entitled to undertake. The procedure followed in all of them revolves around two things. One is production of prescribed document or documents, and the second is physical verification. The difference this time, I think there are two or three fundamental differences. Number one, that a presumption of citizenship has been attached to the electoral roll of 2003, which means, according to the Election Commission, that all those who figured in that roll need not produce any evidence except that they fill an enrollment form and they refer to the electoral roll where their name already figures in 2003. So, to my mind, the first time that an evidentiary value has been attached to a certain document, but all those who are post 2003, after following the due process, they have to again submit the documents which Election Commission wants. And the ERO will then take a decision whether to enroll them or not. The second thing is that they have divided the post 2003 persons based on their date of birth, pre 87, between 87 and 2004 December, and post 2004. And all the three categories have been asked to produce different kinds of documents. Now, that to my mind has created a serious issue. The point is that the moment you say that all those registered in 2003, they are deemed to be citizens. By inference, does it mean that all those who are enrolled after 2003, till they submit satisfactory evidence, they are no longer being treated as citizens by the Election Commission for the purpose of being enrolled as electors? In our country, according to the Citizenship Act, no single document is issued by the government or by whoever is the competent authority to determine your status as a citizen. This has been the case right since 1950 when the Election Commission was formed and it started preparing the first electoral roll. Nevertheless, it did not prevent the Election Commission from adopting its own procedure to satisfy itself that those who are citizens of India were enrolled in keeping with the spirit of Article 326. So I think that is what is at the nub of the controversy.
So, sir, by wading into this very contentious issue of citizenship verification, do you think the Commission has overstretched its remit? I mean, now you have a court case coming up on Thursday. Several political parties have objected to it. Does it put the Commission itself and its remit under question?
I think, Anubhuti, based on the electoral rolls prepared by the Commission, people have been casting their votes. As late as January this year, there was a revision done and a roll prepared, published. Last year, you had the general elections, before which, again, there was a revision which was done. So, if there is an annual revision done every time, and electoral rolls are prepared, based on which people have already exercised their right to vote, it really does not stand to logic that we ask crores of people to resubmit those documents. Now, one of the explanations given in the order of 24th June is that the people who are registered as voters after 2003, they were done following the due process and with full satisfaction of the ERO according to Section 23 of Representation of People Act. But the Election Commission says that in the interest of transparency, we want to upload those documents because now technology makes it possible for uploading the document. It's a very valid point. If there is a modernization effort going on, people are being asked to submit documents. It's a legitimate request, but it should not be at the risk of my losing my right to vote if, for some reason, those documents are not available with me. So I think that is the critical issue that the Election Commission, having followed the due process, enrolling crores of voters, now reascertaining their eligibility to vote. I think that has created the controversy and that is what has agitated the people. I would feel that since the Election Commission has said that they want to do it for the entire country, they should take it up in states which are not immediately facing a poll. And I think it should be a procedure with adequate amount of time being given to everyone. And more than anything else, I think it should be done in consultation with all the stakeholders. So I don't know what kind of consultation took place, but the amount of grievance it has caused or the complaints which are surfacing, that clearly means that everybody was not on the same page.
What do you think are the overall implications for this whole process of electoral roll revision, which has been under spotlight for now, and the EC's approach towards it?
My own expectation and wish is that people adopt a reasonable approach. As I said, nobody can take away the right of the Election Commission to undertake purification of rolls. The implication could be that those who are excluded from the roll, who had earlier been on the roll, what will be their status? By inference, does it mean that they no longer continue to be citizens? And who will determine how they will regain their status? So we already had an experience in Assam where the D voters list was created. And to the best of my understanding, we don't know what happened to the people who were put in the D voters list, whether their cases have been adjudicated, whether they have come back to the voters list. So why create another set of people who will be put to this kind of insecurity? There should be ample time available for people to get rid of their anxieties, understand the procedure. For example, in the notification made on the 24th of June, it was said that duly filled forms should be submitted and they should be accompanied by self attested documents. Now, it is not clear whether if I don't submit my documents by 25th of July and if I only submit my enumeration form, will my name appear in the draft electoral roll? What is the meaning of a duly filled form? Does it mean form accompanied by requisite documents? Or does it mean simply a form? So I think these are things which should be clarified. The second is that I think this is too sensitive a matter to be guided by press notes. Every decision should be notified through a proper order and conveyed to the right quarters, including sharing with the political parties or as many public organizations as possible. And then, of course, a campaign can be launched to educate people. But it would help everyone if there is less and less confusion in the process.
So this process has led to abject chaos in the state. I asked my colleague and ET's ace political reporter Kumar Anshuman to give me a sense of what's happening on ground. In his answer, Anshuman mentions BLOs. BLOs are block development officers that oversee the implementation of government schemes in the area of a city or town that they are allotted. Here's Anshuman.
Look, Anirban, the BLOs are now moving on ground. They are distributing the enumeration forms which has been given by the Election Commission, and every voter needs to fill in. And as you know, there are different criteria of voters that if your name appears in 2003 voter list, then you just need to fill up the form and give it to the BLO and it will be registered. But in case your name is not in that 2003 voter list and you're a person who became a voter after that, then there are a set of documents which has been asked by the Election Commission that you need to provide. And that is where, the panic, or you say the kind of confusion, and the people are confused what will happen next, that is going on the ground. Although Election Commission had eased it a bit, saying that, initially you just need to fill the form and submit it, and you can submit the documents later. They issued an advertisement in all the prominent newspapers on Sunday that, if you do not have a document, then the BRO or ERO, elected election representative officer, based on the documents which you have, he'll decide whether your name will be there in the voter list or not. The Election Commission has made these facilities online also, but when I talk to the people on the ground, they hardly know about that online facility, and they are relying more and more on the BLO distributing forms and coming to them. Now the problem is that the BLO needs to submit the document on mobile phone, and the BLOs which are there, they're not very equipped with handling the mobile phone in a way that they have been asked to do. So if they are supposed to upload around, say, 100 or 150 forms per day, that number is quite less, and they are able to do it in the entire day, 30, 40 odd forms they are able to submit on the website. Still, there is about more than around 15 days left for the entire exercise to take place. The another thing is that the people are rushing to the government offices like blocks, subdivisional offices for documents, to procure documents which can ensure that they remain voters in Bihar. And the blocks did not expect this kind of rush towards them. So there is some kind of delay in, releasing those certificates. So every day the applications are piling up, and there is a fear. Fear is that because if your name gets omitted from the voter list, so the fear that next in line would be that if you are not a voter from this place, how can you get ration card or benefit from the government? How can you be a government beneficiary in this area? And the larger fear among the migrants especially is that, going in future, they could be denied a domicile certificate or something which they would require for their children or their kids when they try to apply for government jobs or some educational institutes in Bihar. So among all these fears, this exercise is going on. We also know that there is a pending case in the Supreme Court. So people are anxious also that they should see what Supreme Court says on 10th of July. So yeah, that exercise currently is going on.
As Anshuman said, several bodies like the Association for Democratic Reforms, People's Union for Civil Liberties, cephalogist turned politician Yogendra Yadav and others have taken the Election Commission to court over the revision, saying it violates multiple constitutional guarantees. The political backlash is massive. Here's Yogendra Yadav in a recent television interview.
There is no way more than 50% of Bihar can have any one of those documents. And that is my biggest problem with this whole exercise. So obviously, I do not object to, please do one more summary revision. Absolutely, I have no problems. My problem is with the idea of rewriting the whole voters list afresh.
And here's Anshuman again.
So definitely, the fear engripped among the opposition parties is that the government, or they allege that the government or the Election Commission is trying to remove a section of voters from the voter list just to benefit the ruling dispensation. That's what their allegation is. The leaders demanded asked Election Commission for a meeting. Congress, RJD, all the opposition parties came together for this. And they met Election Commission and addressed the issue. What their point is that, especially RJD leader SV Yadav, he says that, if this voter list was valid for 2024 Lok Sabha election, then why this vote list is not valid for 2025 Assembly election? And if someone who has got a new voter ID card for the 2024 Lok Sabha election, then now he needs to provide another set of documents. So they claim that it's a kind of proving your citizenship in a state where you have stayed for a long time. It is not an exercise to add more people to vote, but it is an exercise to disenfranchise people from their rights to vote. That's what the opposition allegation is. And they have called for a chakka jam in Patna. And the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi would also participate in a walk, in a march, starting from one place in Patna to Election Commission office in Patna. Bihar has a very high migrant population. Almost 2 crore, 3 crore people are staying outside state for jobs and for other regions, for medical treatments also. So all eyes, as I said, all eyes are now on Supreme Court. And then the decisions in the opposition camp also will be taken post what Supreme Court guidelines comes on this.
I saved the last question for Anubhuti. Even if this is implemented, despite the troubled waters that it has gone into, do you think it will set a precedent for similar implementation across the country? Will it have a countrywide impact in any way?
Well, either way, it is bound to have a countrywide impact now, I think. The Commission, in its 24th June order, where it announced the SIR in Bihar, did say clearly that it is looking at scaling it up across the country, and it will announce the schedule and the system for the same little later. So we are still awaiting that. It hasn't been announced yet. So we'll have to wait and watch if the Commission recalibrates or changes the system in any way.
So as the people of Bihar brave its rising floodwaters to fill forms and scramble for documents to make sure they exist in the state's citizenship records, we are left with perhaps one big question. Are we really cleaning up our electoral rolls or our voters? That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Vinay Joshi and Radhas Naik, sound designed by Radhas Naik. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, wherever you get your podcast. Keep listening. The external clip used in this episode belongs to its owner. Credits are mentioned in the description.